Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network. And this is my monthly show where I choose one of my favorite movies and basically just gush about it with a guest. And this week and this month's episode, we're going to be talking about John Carpenter's The Thing, one of my favorite horror films. And joining me is my friend Kevin. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Shane. Thank you for having me on to talk about one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, there we go. We both really love this film, and I figured, as we always do on this show, we kind of talk about a couple of like broader topics related to the film first, giving some context. But Kevin, what's your experience with John Carpenter?
My experience with John Carpenter has been pretty good.
Hmm.
Uh, I like his movies. I'm a big fan of Halloween
Yep.
and The Fog in
Hmm.
particular. Those
Yep.
are the biggest ones, biggest films of his that I have been a fan of. Along with this, I don't know if I've seen too much of his other work, um, but very effective. I like the atmosphere he sets in all of his movies that
Hmm.
I've seen, and this is definitely a very atmosphere heavy movie.
Yeah. I just so happened to watch literally every single one of his films for my Welcome to the Wasteland show.
Everyone.
Um, God, that was so long ago because John Ford took so long. It was like 2 years ago that I did all those John Carpenter films. But like, he has a very interesting career because generally he's been known as a very genre filmmaker. So like, he doesn't make a whole lot of dramas. They're horror, they're action movies. There's some fantasy and sci-fi thrown in there, but like some of his big
Yeah.
ones, like you mentioned, Halloween, The Fog, The Thing, horror. And he has films like Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness that are some of his other horror films that he made. And, films like Escape from New York and
Oh, you
Big.
know what? I have seen that too,
Mhm.
but it's been a long time. I don't remember it that well.
Yeah, that's one of his like most famous action films that he's done. He's done a lot of action like Assault on Precinct 13, the original film from the 70s, and then Big Trouble in Little
I
China.
was just gonna say that because I haven't only seen his horror movies. Big Trouble in Little China is another one. I always forget that was him for some reason.
It's such a strange film. It's so weird. And but it's so fun. And that's one of the things like Carpenter has like this B movie kind of feel to a lot of his films, except for this one. Like the thing is like this had the budget and they made the most out of this budget. A lot of his films I describe are like a lot of his films the exceed the limits of his budget. So like there's things that feel like they're probably like cut down like They Live. They definitely ran out of budget in the third act of that movie because they started like super rushing things towards the end. But the thing is like very often his films feel like they didn't have enough budget for the ideas that he had. And that gives it kind of like this B movie kind of feel. Like Escape from New York has such a huge idea, but like there's so many moments where it's just like this is really cheap. But it's a lot of fun and that's charming about it. And I'm a huge Carpenter fan. Halloween is also one of my favorite horror films. And so many of his films are just a lot of fun. It definitely like burnt out. Like besides In the Mouth of Madness, anything from the 90s on were kind of just like not the best. And by the time he made his last two films, which were Ghost of Mars and The Ward, things were pretty bad. But they still had that kind of charm. And thinking about The Thing very specifically has had such a great legacy of body horror because there's
Oh
some
yeah.
wild stuff in this movie. But Kevin, what are your experience? What like are you a fan of body horror films, and are there particular films that stick out to you that you enjoy?
So that's not really a genre I've been that interested in, and
Hmm.
I would say it's a genre I've been afraid of. But most
No, no, stop,
recently,
stop, stop.
yeah, but most recently, I did see The Substance
Yes,
in the theater.
which certainly is a body horror film for sure.
Yeah, like for example, I've never gotten around to watching The Fly. I
Hmm.
know that's another famous example. It's that's if I had to pick a genre, that I would say icks me out the most, it would be body horror.
Well, and just the unnatural feeling of like, I have a body. This is how bodies are supposed to work.
Yeah.
And like, this is not how bodies are supposed to work. And like, the substance in particular, like the whole splitting of the back thing was just like,
Yeah.
nope, I don't like this. And then the amalgamation she turns into by the end with like a face on her shoulder and all kinds of crazy stuff like that.
Not to go into it, not to go off on too much of a tangent about the substance, but one thing I did enjoy about that movie
Mhm.
that is kind of similar here is how the body horror ramps up as the movie goes on.
Yes, it like
It
it
got more
prepares
absurd.
you prepares you as you go
Yeah.
along. And like I'm a huge fan of The Fly, and I would say The Fly's on the same level as The Thing, especially because it's like 80s like practical effects kind of thing. And it does a similar thing where it is this slow building up point because the whole entire crux of the story is like Jeff Goldblum's character is slowly turning into this fly. And yeah, it's pretty gross. There's some really gross moments in it. Basically, Cronen. If you're gonna watch a bunch of Cronenberg films, you better be prepared to deal with a lot of body horror, whether it's
So I've heard.
Videodrome, The Fly, Crimes
Maybe
of the Future, one of
maybe
his
the main
most.
reason I haven't checked out his filmography yet. I know what its reputation is.
I would say if you do want to explore some of his films, maybe start with History of Violence and Eastern Promises, because those are
Okay.
more like thrillers. They don't have body horror in them.
Just totally separate genres.
Yeah, like the
Okay.
early 2000s into the mid 2000s, Cronenberg was a very different kind of vibe. Even the most dangerous method was a Freud and Carl Jung film. So like it was a psychological kind of thing. But no, a lot of his films from the 80s are definitely body horror and like crazy body horror for sure. Like Videodrome's like the it's like a weird sexual kind of body horror too.
Hmm.
And especially Crimes of the Future, one of his most recent ones, because they basically society has left sex behind and it's all about having doing surgeries for sexual pleasure. And it's like
Okay.
I'm like, this is pushing me to places I don't like.
Yeah.
But like I like 80s body horror because I appreciate practical effects like this a lot.
In this movie, it continues to blow me away since I first saw this.
Absolutely. Well, actually, you know what? I feel like that's a good place to start because
Yeah.
probably the most famous thing about this movie is the insane amount of work they had to put into the body horror practical effects of this because if I'm not mistaken, the practical effects makeup artist if like worked 20-hour days on nothing but like candy and soda and wound up having to check into like a hospital or something at the end of
No.
filming
No.
because like it was just an extremely unhealthy thing. And it was the 80s. Times were different then.
Oh
uh,
yeah.
you would get super obsessive on a film set. Like, I guess there weren't unions to be like, it's off the clock, stop working. But I guess what are some of the ones that really stick out to you, Kevin, with the special effects in this?
So honestly, I know it's one of the first scenes in the movie actually,
Yeah.
but when the dog is in the kennel
Mm-hmm.
and they all have to come out and see that just that whole sequence, but in particular, the very first time the dog opens its face up in front of the
Mm-hmm.
other dogs,
Yep.
that one shot has stuck with me since I've.
And you have like the tentacles like sticking out
Oh
and like grabbing onto
yeah,
things.
like
And
tongue tentacles
yep.
basically.
And even just like the sound effects, like there's like like a
Oh
hissing
yeah,
kind of
every time.
every time there's some like this ethereal kind of just strange like hissing noise every time it's like it's like time to attack
Yeah.
and shoots out its tentacles. But no, that kennel scene is scary, and also because like they're dogs. It's like don't
Right.
hurt the dogs. The moment a little bit later when they first have their like first interaction with it, and it's half transformed into their colleague, and he has this like it has this giant like morphed hand,
Oh
and he
yeah,
just like
right.
turns to them and goes like
See,
And
those are the parts where the body horror doesn't scare me as much when it's more human. Somehow,
yep.
when it's like an animal, or even when it is a human, but it's taking a weird, unnatural shape, like when it turns into a spider thing
Yes,
at
which
the end.
I feel like the spider head is the
Yeah,
crown jewel of the special effects of this movie.
I feel like it's definitely the most well-known
Yep. Because like
effect shot in the film.
well, and that's like a combo pack because how it starts is the guy's dying and they go for the defibrillators and the chest opens and it's a giant mouth and bites the guy's hands off. And you're just like, holy shit. And
Which, by the way, I don't get why they were defibbing him when he didn't even have a pulse. But
I'm not a doctor. I didn't know it. But no, they're probably banking on people
yeah,
not knowing the difference. It was for the drama, Kevin,
it was for the drama.
and for the setup of that. Because like I guess you could have like I don't know, could have just been doing some compressions or whatever, but
They
the
waited a hot minute to start those chest compressions too.
which like just that moment of the first time didn't happen, but you know something bad's gonna happen, and then chest, giant teeth, and just crunch, and then flames, and they start lighting on fire, and that's the moment where the head of the thing just starts ripping off the body, and you see all these like green piping kind of
Oh,
like
that's like the green stuff. I
yeah,
forgot about the green stuff.
and then the head pulls completely off, falls on the floor, and then grows spider legs and like little eyes on top of it.
Yeah, like bug eyes.
Yes, and then starts crawling away. And that reaction of one of the guys like, what the is one of the best
Oh, you gotta
reactions
be
in
kidding
me.
me.
Is,
Something like that.
is one of the best reactions in any movie. And then of course they light it on fire.
Of course.
Um, one of the body horror moments at the end of the film with the special effects, which is when it's like this whole amalgamation of everything. It has like a
Yeah.
giant dog head on top, and I have to say, this is one of the greatest line deliveries in the history of cinema. Is when Kurt Russell is just like, "Well, f you too," just chucks
Yeah.
the dynamite at it and
Honestly, you
blows it
can
up.
I could name any Kurt Russell line and say that was one of the greatest line deliveries in movie history.
Well, because it is Kurt Russell,
That's true.
and just like it's the best comeback ever. He's just like obviously he has no idea what this thing's screaming at him, but
Right.
all he knows is there's only one response to it. It's saying you goodbye. And just that whole thing with all of it. And there's like one moment in this whole movie where the special effects don't really hold up. And it's when it's right after the blood test sequence where, you know, the thing like opens up and bites into a guy and starts flailing the body around, and it's a dummy.
Oh, right, right, right. There is, you're right. There's a moment where you can definitely
No,
tell.
it's a dummy.
Is the way the legs move, I
It's
think
like
is what it was.
it's like
Maybe.
noodling around, and I'm just like, well, that wasn't convincing, but the whole rest of the scene was amazing, so I can get past this. It's like,
It's the type of thing I'll definitely notice when we talk about it, but while I'm watching the movie, I'm not even
yeah,
thinking
I
about
don't
that at
care.
all.
Well, because that scene is incredible, and we'll certainly get to that. But in terms of the direction, now I did such a deep dive in John Carpenter. One of the things that I found very interesting is he did a student film called Captain Voyeur, where the whole entire film was a POV short film.
Okay.
And if you notice, he does POV shots in a lot of movies. That opening sequence of Halloween behind the mask and
Right.
everything is incredible. And there's just a couple of moments in here. There's one very mysterious sequence. I think it's towards like the beginning of the third act where we don't know who it is, but it's a POV shot like walking around the base.
Oh
Like
yeah.
and I'm like it like those little choices bring so much intrigue because you're like, who is it?
Yeah.
What's going on here? And those are the great things with John Carpenter. And also, he knows how to build tension. And I think the best example of this is that blood test scene.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're just like, we don't even know what would happen if you fail the blood test. we don't have any idea. This is an alien thing, and they're slowly heating up the little like coil, testing the blood, and going through each of these things, and then it comes out of nowhere where the blood comes to life. It's like, and you're just like,
Yeah, where the blood is crawling across the floor.
yes. And then one of the bodies starts convulsing, and you're
Uh,
like, oh my god. And because this film might have amazing body horror, but the most important thing about this film is paranoia.
Absolutely.
And John Carpenter really knows how to build that up because at any given moment, you have no idea who's a thing and you don't know who to trust. None of them know who to trust. And just that whole entire conceit in this claustrophobic space is just so good. And you're just on the edge of your seat the whole entire movie.
It's a very claustrophobic film for sure.
Well, because the thing is, like, you can't get more isolated than
Antarctica.
in Antarctica and then in a base confined with everybody and you can't leave. It's like COVID on steroids. It's like you are out in the middle of just ice and nothing. And I appreciate how the setting was leveraged for plot too. Because the thing is, it's like, do we just blow this all up because and just make sure it doesn't get out of here?
I really enjoy that choice
Hmm.
in the movie because ultimately, despite everything that's gone down and all the mistrust
Hmm.
that the entire group has had amongst each other, they still all recognize at the end, oh, what who's left of them anyway, that it's maybe it's better if we just leave it be and let this die out.
Yeah. Well, and I love that moment towards the beginning of the film with Wolford Brimley's character Blair doing some math and realizing like, oh shit, if this thing gets out, like this is gonna be really bad. And
Which that scene was so cute, by the way. He had his little computer model of a virus on there.
yeah, which then you get that really tense scene where he's just like whipping out a gun, destroying all the communications, like shooting at people.
Do you think that's before or after he's turned?
I think it's before.
I think so too.
Because I think he legitimate I think he is the most pragmatic of them and realizes that we can't get out of here. We're all dead, but we can't let this thing get out of here.
Right.
And he's trying to break the communications because we don't want anybody coming here and helping it get out. He definitely turned when they locked him up. Like at some point while he was out there, it got him, and then he started doing like his digging and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the whole thing. We could do a whole entire like really detailed dig through like who turned when
Right.
because that is one of the most fascinating films. The things about this film is like when did people get turned
Oh yeah,
if
because
they
it's
did?
definitely happening off screen some of the time.
Yeah, and like obviously like the biggest question is at by the very end, was Keith David the thing? And like, did Childs get turned at some point? Because that was extremely suspicious
Yeah.
when he leaves the base and runs off into the snow. And the three of them are like, where's Childs going? And then he conveniently shows up back at the very end of the film. And like, I've seen theories that like you can't see his breath compared to
Oh,
uh
I've heard some of those theories. I think I've heard that one.
specifically like
I don't necessarily buy them. I think it's perfectly fine, just left up to
well,
interpretation.
and that's the thing, this ending fits the film so well because
Yeah.
it's all about paranoia. And
It's
for
better if it's not answered, actually.
well, and to be honest, I think McCready's down to the point where it's like it doesn't matter
Oh yeah.
because either way they're gonna die,
What
nobody's gonna save them.
what I like about it though is that they're still, even if Childs is the thing, what one thing that I do appreciate that's also kind of sinister is that the thing clearly takes the host's memories and everything.
Hmm.
So it knows everything about that person, but it also knows that it's the thing.
Hmm.
So at the end of the movie, when it comes down to making that choice, it can still behave as Childs would. and
Well,
maybe make that choice.
and it's very fitting too because that it's Childs because him and McCready did not get along at all in this
Yeah,
whole entire
very
movie.
fitting.
They don't trust each other to begin with. I don't think they trusted each other before this incident happened. Just from like, and that's also another interesting thing is because this film's very efficient in setting up dynamics.
Right.
Because like you don't get big backstories of their relationships. Like you don't see them spending a whole bunch of time together building up relationships, but you can tell in these situations who doesn't like who and who doesn't trust
Yeah,
who.
what one line that caught me in particular that emphasized that a bit between these two characters is I think it's towards the beginning.
Hmm.
I think it's after the dog kennel incident.
Hmm.
When what's the one Irish guy who's with them?
Because I'm looking through.
The one who points the gun at the guy who's trying to steal a shotgun at one point. The guy who gets the guy who gets bitten and eaten by the thing.
I'm trying to see, was it Fuse? Because it's um see, I know Gary. He's the guy who's supposedly in charge, but definitely doesn't have any authority in this situation because nobody
Right.
nobody nobody trusts his authority, and you pick that up very easily.
But anyway, regardless of I
Mhm,
forget the specific characters that were involved, but there's a little interaction between McCready and Childs where they're trying to delegate who should be leading them because the one guy says, "We, maybe you'll feel better if someone else was in charge." After he
mhm,
has that little
mhm,
incident holding the guy at gunpoint, and I don't feel like Childs was necessarily overly excited or anything, given the situation that everyone's in. But McCready says, why don't we leave this to someone more even tempered? And then McCready basically takes charge at that point.
Well, yeah, and that's definitely a moment of contention. Like you can tell they don't like each other,
Right.
and
But that's
they
an
don't.
efficient way of getting it across.
Yeah, and it's a single line of dialogue that says a whole lot about their perspective of each other, especially because like
Right.
McCready's the pilot, like he's kind of like the cowboy of the group,
Yeah, he's not one of the scientists. Just like
and
the dog handler.
which and like yeah, Clark's much more of and that's the thing we know about Clark right from the bat. Like he cares about his dogs above
Yeah.
the people.
I felt so bad for that
Oh
guy.
my god! And like he was one of the more interesting characters of like, is he or isn't he?
Yeah.
Because he could have easily been because that dog was what brought like the dog was the thing. That whole entire opening sequence with the Norwegians and like the shooting at the dog through the
Yeah.
beginning was so great. And just the dynamics because like there's some racial tensions definitely like undercurrent
Absolutely.
under some of these between with like Childs and Knowles. I think specifically how some of the characters interact with Knowles and
Yeah.
treat him specifically. And then you have the doctor, um, which there's a theory that the doctor's a spy. I saw like he's a Russian spy, which is
Okay.
interesting.
I had some off vibes from him from time to time. I couldn't quite place why. I think it's
Mhm,
just because you know, a little antithetical to how everyone else is behaving. He's a little too calm in
mhm.
certain situations, but I don't know if that's necessarily a problem or just the way he
Well,
is.
the thing is, like, if he were a spy, he definitely would be somebody who would be overly calm in a situation and stuff like that. And
Right.
like, that's the cool thing about this film. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, if he is or isn't, that's just like added layers to like the dynamics. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are. This thing's coming for you.
Because take the situation at hand away, and if I just met a doctor with that demeanor, I wouldn't think anything of it.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about this, which fun fact, this is not a John Carpenter score.
Right.
But it sounds like one for sure.
Mm.
But he got Ennio Morricone, one of the greatest composers of all time, to agree to do this movie.
So glad
And
he did.
and the score is so simple though. Like it's so stripped down the doom 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 and it's just like burner, and it's just like that atmosphere,
Very ambient.
which is exactly why you would think that it's a John Carpenter score because it has that kind of like tones and just feeling. What's super interesting, and this is my favorite fun fact about this movie, there was score written for the blood test scene,
Huh.
and it's called Bestiality, and it's strings. It's doom 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 doom, and it just keeps like building and building and building, which would have been extremely stressful. But the choice to make that scene without music was the right choice.
I would agree.
And fun fact, that music was recycled in The Hateful Eight
Huh.
by Quentin Tarantino during the coffee scene.
Oh, I didn't see Hateful Eight, but
So
I trust you.
there is a scene where we know something's wrong with something, and we're waiting. And the fun thing is, Kurt Russell's in the scene.
Really?
Yes, well, because that's Tarantino. Tarantino's very
Yeah,
like
he would do that.
Quentin Tarantino makes references to movies and makes meta references all the time in his movies. But it's so fascinating because it's a great piece of music, and because Ennio Morricone did the score for The Hateful Eight. So like it all came full circle, which also Hateful Eight has a lot of influence from The Thing, just from like the claustrophobic out in the snow
Okay.
heightening of like we don't trust who everybody is in the situation. So there's a lot of elements that it borrows from The Thing, and it's fitting that he winds up using unused music from The Thing in The Hateful Eight. But I just think that's so fascinating because it was such a great piece of music, and it's a shame that it didn't get used. But the choice to make the blood test scene without music was perfect because it didn't need it. And that's a hard choice of a director because like, wow, my composer made this great music, but we don't need it. It's gonna get cut
Yeah,
out.
knowing when to include the music.
Yep. In terms of, I know we've been talking about some of the ensemble already. First off, I would like to mention Kurt Russell's amazing hair and beard.
Oh
It's
yeah,
it's
especially the hair.
it's absolute perfection. And also it makes it like Wyatt Russell really looks like McCready.
Really?
Yeah, like his son when he because a lot of times he has a beard and longer hair, and I'm just like, yep, he looks just like his dad, except
I'll have to look up a
blonde,
picture of him. I don't know if I've seen him.
except blonde, like his mom, Goldie Hawn.
Oh,
So like, and McCready just has that perfect look, and he has like the cowboy hat too at the very beginning of the film and stuff like that. And
oh wow, you weren't kidding. I'm looking at a picture of Wyatt Russell. Right, he
he
looks like
literally
McCready.
just like looks like a blonde version of his dad.
He does.
But like it's I love McCready because like Kurt Russell just swaggers his way into any movie and brings so much charisma. And like for a film like this, it's interesting because like he is by far the biggest name in this film, but honestly, up to this point, most of Kurt Russell's career was a child actor for
Really?
Disney.
I knew he did that.
Yeah,
I haven't seen any of those.
because this to confirm, like he didn't have a ton of like he didn't have a ton of experience. He did do one of John Carpenter's few actual films that was like a drama is he did a biopic for TV about Elvis, and Kurt Russell played Elvis.
Huh.
Yep. And because like up to this point, like Kurt Russell was mostly a kid actor.
So that's how John Carpenter got his hands on him for this.
Yes. And right around this point, because he did Escape from New York first in 81. And so like he did Elvis in 1979, which God, that movie was 2 hours and 50 minutes. It did not need to be.
Hmm.
It was a made for TV biopic. He was the voice of Copper in The Fox and the Hound the same year as Escape from New York.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
I don't remember that.
I recently rewatched that and I'm like, oh my God, it is Kurt Russell. And then he did the thing in 1982. But from there, like
And he was in a movie called The Computer Shoes or something, right?
he was in the crazy thing is he was in so many Disney movies as a kid. And also, I think his first film was he was a kid actor in an Elvis movie,
Huh.
which is hilarious because then he played Elvis. So Kurt Russell's had
Oh,
such a
in a movie that Elvis was in. You
yes,
mean I got you.
yes, he was a kid actor in one of Elvis's movies,
Right.
and he got to interact with Elvis. So
Studying for his future role.
yes, he was doing the work years in advance. But Kurt Russell just has that energy, and I love Keith David, and between this and They Live, he's done some amazing work in John Carpenter films because you need somebody like Childs in this
He's so
situation,
good.
and Keith David is such a strong presence. Wilford Brimley, which is so funny because what did I know Wilford Brimley from growing up was the diabetes commercials.
Oh yeah.
Like, buddy, our age.
He's an actual acclaimed actor.
It's like, my name's Wilford Brimley and I have type 2 diabetes. Like that's how we knew Wilford
Uh-huh.
Brimley. But like this, he could be scary and intense. It was also really weird not seeing him with a mustache.
Yeah.
Just for the record. But like obviously they're the three most well-known actors in this, but you have like Richard Mazer, who's Clark, I think does a really good job in this film.
Yeah, Clark was so nervous in this movie.
Mhm. Donald Moffat, who played Gary, who I've definitely seen him in other things, as well as a character actor.
Gary, he's the one that gets eaten, right?
Gary's the one that is the one in
Oh,
charge that nobody wants in charge because nobody trusts him.
yeah, yeah.
Um, did he made it to the final three, right?
Yeah, that's the
Because
guy
he's the
that's
one that I think it's Blair grabs and does like that disgusting thing where he sticks his hand in his mouth.
yeah.
Um but no, like there's just in general, this cast is really good. Even like the ones who aren't like big names do really good making these characters come to life. And this film works because these are all fleshed out, real, feeling, authentic characters. Like you believe that these men all have been stuck in this place together and have authentic tension with each other.
And I forget which one it is, but one of them has a line like, "Hey, this guy was my friend. My friend. I've known him for 10 years." So they've clearly had a history together.
Well, and that's a challenging thing because like so quickly it's like this could not be your friend.
Right.
And that's what's so terrifying about this film. But I guess Kevin, was there anything else that really stood out to you that you wanted to point out?
I just want to go back to Keith David again
Okay.
because I really think he was a standout in this movie. I like all the choices made with his character.
Mhm.
He's equally as well as McCready trying to lead the group, I think.
Yes.
But he's getting more pushback.
Well, and you could definitely tell that Childs has pushed too many people's buttons in this place because they don't
Yeah.
want to put him in charge. But he has the power and the presence to keep pushing himself to that place.
Right, which again is probably a good quality in someone who's going to be stuck in Antarctica for a while.
Yes, and just, when you're confined and stuck in this place and building up that tension. Also, one other sequence that I really love is McCready coming in from the cold and he's so like frozen
Oh yeah.
and he has the flare and everything. That's so tense. And when the heart attack happens,
Yeah.
like that whole entire, because was that Norris, I think was the one that had the heart attack
I think so.
and played by Charles Hallahan, who I definitely recognize him. Who's in Dante's Peak. I watched that a lot growing up for sure. Um,
Is he the one that gets dissected and defibbed
yeah, he is the one who who then
in
chest
Norris?
opens
Okay.
open and that's like, well, um,
Imagine turning into a thing and then dying of a heart attack.
which I think like was that on purpose?
You got the wrong body. This is a sick body.
Well, I think like was it on? Well, that is an
It
interesting
could have been
point.
caused by the thing. I don't know if it would do that to itself if it's inhabiting the body though,
That's an interesting because I never thought about
because the
that.
characters repeatedly mention that it's trying to self-preserve. But do we know that?
Well, that's an interesting point because I have no idea. You know what? I never really thought about that. Like, was it a legitimate heart attack? And then it
Yeah.
was like, shit, now I'm stuck in this
Because
body.
really, there's a lot of speculation going on. So there could be
Yep.
any number of reasons why anything's happening.
Well, and you can
Maybe
tell
it's unclear.
he's slowly starting to have problems because
Oh
like you could
yeah,
see him like sweating and feeling really tense leading up to that moment, and then that was just a because like that was a bam bam bam
right.
crescendo of McCready comes back in with the flare, the heart attack happens, the defibrillator happens, the spider head happens, and you're just like, oh my god.
And it's such a good way to build suspicion because with all this stuff happening, of course someone's going to be acting a little out of character every now and then.
Well, yeah, and then you have this situation was like, and that's so good about this film being an ensemble. It's like the peripheries. Like, what are all the other characters doing in these
Yeah,
situations? It's like it would be interesting to go through this movie one time, just watching the background characters instead of focusing on like who's engaging in the moment
right.
to kind of see like what's going on if there's like hints that's there's so much watchability rewatchability with this film
I'm going to have
for
to do a
that.
rewatch and just look in the background. This is the movie for that.
Absolutely. Now, one way I wanted to wrap up this because I thought this would be an interesting idea because I don't think it would be I don't think it would be like a situation where it's like how dare they remake the thing because like this literally was a remake. Um
Yeah, what was this, a remake of Thing from Another World? Is that what
yeah.
it was?
Yep.
And
That how
they're both based on a book.
yes. And the original one is a really effective film and I liked it. It's just at that point they didn't have the budget to make it a shapeshifter kind of thing and it's more of like
Mm.
it's like a alien Frankenstein monster
That
kind of
that was
looking
a
thing.
50s movie.
Yes.
Okay.
It was produced by Howard Hawks who apparently had his
Huh.
fingers in everything. And it's one of those like did he really direct it? He insisted that he really directed it but then the director was like no he didn't.
It's a
um
good thing his fingers didn't get bitten off when he went to defibrillate
yep, there
someone.
we go. So, and they didn't remake this. They made a prequel to this. The 2000 like 11 the thing was
Yeah, I haven't
about the
seen that one.
Norwegian base.
And it has the same title, so that is confusing.
It is
I
confusing.
thought it was a remake for a while.
I assumed it was, but then I found out that it was actually about the Norwegian base, which yeah, that was they were just trying to get people like, "Oh, it's the thing."
Yeah.
Which is interesting because this is a box office bomb because this came out the same weekend as ET,
Oh, that'll do
which that sucks. It sucks for the thing.
it.
Because yes, there was another Alien movie that everybody else was going to go see. 1982
The
was
less disturbing one, the less
yes.
mentally scarring
Well,
one.
actually, if you talk to Jess, E.T. was more mentally scarring because
That's fair.
she because looking at
It scared me as a kid. Oh, not that part. I meant the government part, you know.
oh no, E.T. itself scares the shit out of Jess. So wrinkly and creepy. Um, I was never creeped out by ET, but
Yeah.
I understand why Jess was. But who do you think should remake the thing if they did remake it today?
Ooh. You know, if that were to be made today, who directed The Substance? Because I feel like
Carolee
they would
Farge would be an interesting choice for that.
they would handle the mixture of effects and everyone's emotional state pretty well.
I feel like
It's
she
totally different in The Substance. It's a lot more absurd and ironic, but
well, and also I've seen her other film Revenge, and her films are so colorful. Like it would be very interesting seeing her have to like be confined to like this very dark monochromatic kind of situation in
yeah.
like a military base kind of thing, but directorial wise like that's an interesting choice for sure. Like I'm trying to avoid just being like Mike Flanagan
Yeah.
because like Mike Flanagan can make any horror movie.
Backup
So
choice I think would be or maybe first choice is hard to say. I think his name's Alejandro Inarritu. Is he the one who did The Revenant?
that would be a very interesting choice for
Because
sure.
I felt some similarities there, and not again not remotely the same type of
Honestly,
story, but
I would be interested to see him direct this and
remote
have
location
Emmanuel
trauma.
Lubezki, his cinematographer, shoot this movie.
Oh,
Because, like, if this had the vibe of The Revenant, with that kind of like all natural, oh my god, all natural light and stuff like that. That would be
Yeah.
really creepy.
You wouldn't even have to set it in modern day Antarctica. You could set it in the past. It would be something like you could do like a predator and prey situation.
Oh damn. That's interesting. That is very interesting. I'm trying to think who else I would pick besides Mike Flanagan, because I am very much leaning towards I
Yeah.
would just say Mike Flanagan would kill this.
My final answer is Alejandro Inarritu.
That's a very interesting choice. Um, for some reason, I'm just blanking. There's so many great horror directors, and all I can think of is Mike Flanagan. Um, he has way too much stuff on his plate already. Because now he's just like he wrote the Clayface movie that's going to be coming out, but he's not
uh,
directing it. Because he's already doing a whole bunch of other stuff. But I feel like with what Mike Flanagan's been able to do, which he's making the new Exorcist movie, because after they fired the director of Exorcist Believer, they
uh,
brought Mike Flanagan on to
are
revitalize this
are
franchise.
they continuing the same
That's a good
continuity?
question because I have no idea.
Okay. Well, that's
That's a whole other
whole other
conversation.
thing. Yeah.
Eventually, I will get to The Exorcist on this because I do love The Exorcist. That's
Yeah.
another one of my favorite horror films. But maybe I feel eventually they're going to remake the thing because they remake everything. So why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
But
I don't. Yeah.
you have anything else that you wanted to say, Kevin?
Um. Very spooky. Very good.
So good. And I got this on my 4K now.
Oh, I watched it in 4K. I watched it just before I came over.
It was so nice and touched up and it just looks so good.
I actually watched it twice this week.
Nice.
So I watched it a week ago, and then I felt like, oh, let me just refresh my memory again before I come over. It's one of those
Don't tempt
movies,
me with a good time.
as nasty as it gets. It's a very rewatchable movie. I've seen it. This was probably my 10th time watching it.
Well, between this and Halloween, I feel like both of these are incredibly rewatchable horror
Yeah,
films.
and it feels weird because it's one of those movies where I can never remember anyone's name except McCready and Childs. But I've seen it so many times.
Well, because like I think it's because it's such a good ensemble, and everybody's like these really good character actors. Like if they made this today, see, we're not gonna dig that up because like what team of character actors do we get to fill out this
We'd
movie?
have to do some fan casting there.
Yep. Stephen Root and Tim Blake Nelson both definitely are going to be in this movie.
There you go.
But Kevin, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the thing.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this episode. What's your favorite John Carpenter film? What are some of your favorite body horror films to go check out? And also make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. There's a lot of great shows here on the SPM Crew Podcasting Network about movies and television and sports and physical media, music, and all kinds of other things. And we're always looking for new content and new partners and collaborators. So if you're interested in starting a show or guesting on one of the other ones, just make sure to reach out. And if you like the logo, you should definitely go check out our buddy Joe, who made this logo, which I absolutely, honestly, this is probably my favorite logo of any of my shows that I have. And Joe does great work. He has a new Etsy store. I'll make sure to put that information in there for you to go check it out. But most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow here on the SPM Crew Podcasting Network.